Hi, I'm Zoya, and this is going to be my e-portfolio for IBH2LDO. So first starting with my past. So the first prompting question I looked at was, at the beginning of this academic year, how did you define leadership, and did that definition change throughout the year? So for me, leadership meant leading a group. And I know that was supposed to change in LDO, but that meaning was very deeply ingrained in me by that point, and I understood that I wasn't supposed to think about it like that, but I hadn't compartmentalized it quite yet. But throughout this entire year, I've actually ended up thinking about that process completely differently, through the experiences, the knowledge, and the skills that I've learned. So an assignment that majorly influenced me was my assignment in global business. If the professor is watching this, then you know that I spoke about this with you in my one-on-one. But I looked at how I was engaging with my group compared to how I wanted to engage with them. The Canadian side, like I said, was amazing. And the Ghanaian side, we had a lot of difficulties with for completing work, deadlines, AI use, right? And when I talked about this during the one-on-one session, it completely changed how I looked at communication assignments. So when I previously looked at communication, it was just solely about the project. You talk about the project and nothing else. Not about, oh, who are you? What are you doing right now? What kind of, what are you able to put towards this project at this current time? And with that kind of suggestion, it's completely changed how I've looked at group projects in the last little bit. I've been able to communicate properly with my group through not just having a surface level understanding of who they are, and before this, I'd always seen someone who's a leader to be someone who clears the way and takes initiative, and I used to struggle to see myself that way, and I still do on occasion. But it's a skill that I'm working on and improving. So one large struggle that I had this year was actually with anger management. Previously, like I said, in the global business group, we had a couple of difficulties with that team, and I would get so frustrated if the person I was talking to wasn't listening to me in any way, shape, or form, and my ideas weren't being heard, and I would be talked over. And I would feel myself go absolutely insane. But I actually already started to practice emotional regulation techniques without even thinking about it. I would take a step back, leave the situation, come back with a calm and clear mind, even though it did not work a lot of the time. But today I would describe myself as a leader with a focus on kindness, integrity, communication, along those general lines. So for me, I try to focus a lot on inclusion rather than like leading the conversation, because before I wanted to lead the conversation, I wanted to be the leader because that was my idea of what a leader was supposed to be. But recently I've taken a step back. I want to take into account the perspectives, the ideas of everyone around me, and I feel like I wasn't doing that as well as I wasn't doing as well before as I am now. Because I heard one time one of my friends talking about this, about, oh, I was in a group and I was talking to this entire group. I tried to say an idea, but no one heard me other than this one guy, and I felt very, very seen. And he just really felt like a natural leader when he did that. And when she said that she felt seen, I was like, this actually makes sense. Leaders, you have to listen to the communication and ideas and opinions and perspectives of others. So I've just decided to turn that into a focal point in my projects. Also, I have started this last section that I was talking about was for the present. Next, currently, I feel confident in my ability to organize, with organization, respect, integrity, and communication. So a lot of these I've developed over the past year, and sometimes when you're at that point, you really feel like you've mastered that skill. But then a situation comes up and you're like, oh, I only know a part of the whole, a part of the skill. And then you won't realize that for your whole life until you find the next piece or the next experience where you get to find the next part of that skill. And I think I'll always continue to develop these skills because I don't think learning is ever over, and we always need to constantly work to improve ourselves. But one thing that I did say I need to work on is conflict and anger management when I'm involved. When it's to do with other people, I can focus, but when I'm involved, I think I do still need to work on it. So for me, my lived experiences and my identities have definitely led how I interact with others. So I lead probably a privileged life compared to a lot of people. But when it comes to my intersectionality and everything, not so much. So this comes from my time in Dr. Abebe's class. I have a very different way of thinking than my peers. First off, my way of thinking is very analytical a lot of the time rather than the business focus that a lot of people tend to have over here. So for me, I was really focused on math and sciences, and the group that I was socialized with was the exact same way, right? Because we had all been focused on the same thing. It was all the same people in the same classes. And now the people that I talk to in this program are extremely different. I come from Brampton, which had a very high immigrant population, with my parents also being a part of that demographic. Being raised in Brampton here is a part of my identity, and it's shaped the person that I am today. So one thing about me is that I am big on community, which was actually a large part of my application to get into McMaster. So that itself has leaked into my leadership style. Even today, I just joined a community initiative in Waterloo, which I'm like 2 hours away from, but I want to help the community where I can. And I feel like this is the way that I try to interact with others, and I've always tried to be like that. Now looking towards the future, what kind of leader do I want to be and why? Like I mentioned before, I want to be a leader with integrity and kindness. I've always really valued these two traits. For me, integrity always meant just like keeping your word, having values and sticking to them, right? But I feel like we've delved a lot deeper into that topic over like the last year. I also want to be a kind leader because I was raised with the idea that leadership is top down. The person at the top calls the shot, more so with like a cold demeanor. But in reality, a lot of people that I admire today and I currently see as leaders seem to be individuals who have shown me genuine kindness, and I think that is a huge value for many people, and I do want to be that kind of leader eventually. So for me, I think my next step is to face my fear of judgment. I always have tried to take steps in my life to put myself out there and try new things. I held myself back for the last 2 years because of some voice in my head saying, oh, people are gonna think I'm stupid for saying or doing something. And recently, I have made that decision to completely ignore that voice and try to be who I want to be without the fear of judgment or rejection. In this, I think I've already made the hardest step, which is understanding the problem and rationalizing it in your head. So now's the easy part, where I actually step out of my comfort zone and do things I actually want to do. So how am I going to bring this into my next term? I think that learnings are completely useless unless they're applied. So I personally, I take every lesson I've learned in this class, every conversation I've had, every time I've reflected, and I continue to learn from my experiences and I try to better myself. So what would I change about my approach is based on what I've learned in this term. So I've realized that my approach to things is very impulsive and last second. So it's a very spur of the moment thing. One thing I want to change about my approach is that I want to be more structured and deliberate with my decision making rather than going with the flow and yielding poor results. I want to take that step, that deliberate step, and better myself with proper intent. How might the skills, attitudes, and mindsets you've developed help you achieve your personal and professional goals? So, all of the skills and mindsets that I have mentioned have been soft skills. The last thing that I mentioned being deliberate with my intentions and actions. And that's important to me because I actually want to use that to figure out my professional goals. I went into IBH very uncertain about who I am and what I wanted to do with my life because I just stepped out of STEM and completely changed my direction in life. I do know that I want to do something more on the business side of healthcare, but I want to use my mindset of taking deliberate action and finding myself and my future into account and into action when I develop my professional goals or I figure out what more I can do with my professional goals. I've learned a lot about myself in the past year, 2 years if you count one LDO. And I think this class has actually been a major part of that with the reflection skills that it builds and the time that you take to understand and build these mental pathways for yourself. But overall, I have learned a lot about myself and the way that I think and the way that I need to work around that and the way that I need to work on myself. In looking towards artifacts that represent my past, so I think a good representation of that would be my leadership reflections. There are a lot of them, and all of them have a story. All of them have an experience. All of them have a learning, and each learning was always applied, which leads me to my present. I think very recently I've only realized the difference between how I view myself and how others view me. And I feel like the artifact to really represent that is the peer review report that we used for the one-on-one sessions. And that really helps me put into perspective what I really value, what people really value, and whether my style of communication, my style of leadership worked well, and how to adapt to certain situations, which leads me to my future. I don't have an artifact from this class specifically that would look more towards my future section. It is from Commerce 2 INO, where it was our SMART goals for the future, our future job prospects and ideas. And currently I don't align very much with those anymore because the job I thought I was going to go into, I don't want to do it anymore. And I think that really puts back into perspective and brings back my idea of being very deliberate and conscious and intentional with my decision making rather than just picking something and going with it. And I think that's a very good representation of my understanding and analysis on the basis of my future. And that's all I've got for my e-portfolio. Thank you.